So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Um, this is our patient centricity webinar for the life sciences industry. Today, Amiri Settles is going to walk us through a presentation and then field any questions that you have. Please feel free to use the GoToMeeting interface to ask questions at any point during the presentation, okay? So with that, I will turn it over to Amiri to share his screen and get us started. So take it away, Amiri.
Okay, can you see this first slide okay?
You're all good.
Okay. Okay, thank you. As Billy said, my name is Amir Settles. I have been involved in many aspects of clinical trial patient engagement, from strategic prioritization to execution. I have 15 years of life science experience in pharma IT, mostly in project management and process improvement. Billy D, our moderator, is a clinical systems and marketing expert. And I believe we also have Eric Lake, who's worked in the biopharma industry for over 20 years as an engineer and consultant, including with some of the world's biggest biopharma companies on a variety of projects. And Matt Hendricks, who's also worked in life science for nearly 20 years in IT, informatics, and R&D portfolio planning. So I'll start with a quick review of today's agenda. We'll begin by talking about analog and digital, just a little bit of a primer. We'll talk about why patient engagement matters, just getting back to the basics, what researchers learn from patients and what patients can learn from researchers. We'll also look at patient engagement, digital and non-digital types of initiatives, and then driving better patient engagement through the organization. So let's start with a quick primer. So analog and digital are often thought of as like old versus new, or like old versus better. Digital is thought of as more high-tech, but digital actually has less detail than analog. And I wanted to show this illustration just to show the gaps. That analog, represented by the curve, really has more information and can support infinite detail, but the problem is it's prone to interference, and this is intensified over distance. So digital really solves this interference problem by using simple on-off values which can be replicated at the destination, and that helps us really capture, share, and leverage information more clearly. And I wanted to start here just to be on the right footing. Digital is not, doesn't mean better, it's a tool, and I believe it's also true when it comes to patient-centered initiatives. Digital really helps just solve a specific problem, such as capturing and transmitting information. So the best patient engagement will involve both digital and analog. Now I want to kind of go back, set everything level set. Really, what is patient-centered care? And this definition comes from the Institute of Medicine, and I like it because it's simple, and it's a value that we can just carry with us as we consider patient-centered practices in clinical trials. So it's providing care that's respectful and responsive to patient preferences, needs, and values, and ensuring that patient values guide all clinical decisions. Okay, so here are a few reasons why patient engagement matters. One is because of our awareness limitations. So what that really means what we can't see from our vantage point. And the second is because it's important to patients that they do want to be engaged. And then the third, because it offers opportunities to do better. And this is really has to do with these measurable things that we want to look at, like patient satisfaction, cycle times for research, costs, and then to ultimately bring the medicines to improve patients' lives. So what exactly are our awareness limitations? Here are a few that can contribute to our failure to see things. So the first is blindness just due to lack of attention. So this is just the general tendency to miss what we're not looking for, even in some cases when we're staring directly at it. The second is blindness to change, which is failing to notice obvious changes in our environment when they happen to occur slowly or gradually. And then the third one that I wanted to highlight is just the inability to focus on all of the right things. So it might be a tendency to focus too much on a particular event and not see other events that are occurring because they're happening at the same time. our attention is is split. So maybe consider a study that you're having adherence problems. It turns out that the problems are related to packaging, and it's later discovered that color-coded instructions aren't visible to patients because of color blindness. It might be a disease symptom, but not one that's really being measured. And so this is an awareness limitation that could be overcome if there were communication with patients, maybe earlier prior to the development starting. And so here is another just kind of fun example. So for those who haven't seen this Dancing Bear video, which is on YouTube, or just Google it, it really challenges the viewer to count the number of passes made by the team with the white shirts, and most correctly guess the number of passes, which is the objective, but they're surprised to learn that they missed something big that's going on at the same time, which is that a black bear has moonwalked into the midst of the people, and many just require multiple views because it's hard to believe that you can miss it, but after seeing it, it just seems so obvious. So, but this is what we're trained to do. We're trained to see certain events or opportunities, but we may miss others of equal or greater importance because it's outside of our specific training or experience. So awareness limitations can be overcome by engaging other people with different perspectives. And of course, you know, here we're talking about patients and caregivers. The second reason patient engagement matters is that patients just want to be engaged. So this is a quote from a researcher and clinical trial participant, and this was in a C-Script article. And just as a patient, you don't really care that someone didn't dot an I. You cared they sat and listened and cared. And they don't care about paperwork. They don't care about database locks. They care about the interaction. And here is, I think, a good contrast, perceptual contrast between maybe the patient and others working in development. Okay, so in 2013 and 2014, the Schwartz Center conducted a series of consumer focus groups to learn how patients think about compassionate care, what language they use, and what aspects of compassionate care are most important to them. And I just wanted to cite a few of the examples or responses that they gave. One is to receive information clearly in a way that is understandable. Another is to be involved in decisions about care. Another is being listened to attentively, to be treated as a person, not just as a disease, to be respected. And that I meant really the patient and the family and everyone that was involved in that patient's treatment as a in their circle of care. Okay, so the next reason patient engagement matters is that it creates opportunities in terms of business value and really measurable improvement. So we typically think of things like to reduce time by faster study recruitment because patients can find studies, they can be screened, they can be consented. It also provides opportunities to reduce costs by designing better protocols, reducing unnecessary visits and unnecessary procedures. Research has shown that only 7 of 100 patients in the average patient pool actually go on to complete the trial from pre-screening, and that 30% drop out across clinical trials. It also provides opportunities to reduce amendments in addition to this, which take time and money. And according to Tufts, these amendments can be expensive. Median costs as high as $140,000 for phase 2 and over $500,000 for phase 3. And furthermore, these amendment changes cause delays. On average, if it's a big one, 3 months longer compared to protocols without any changes. So another reason it matters, it creates opportunities for organizational improvement through leadership. So a 2000 National Business Ethics Survey by the Ethics Resource Center showed that 90% of employees value leaders with integrity as much as they value income. A 2004 study by the National Association of Colleges Employers found that when employees choose an employer, they place most of their weight in integrity and ethical business practices. And correlations between values and financial performance have also been made. For example, there's evidence that being a values-driven company and promoting ethical behavior pays off. A DePaul University study showed correlations between ethics, values, and higher sales and revenues. Another study showed that it's easier for leaders who are perceived to be ethical to achieve investor confidence and attract capital. And having worked on organizational transformation myself, people really do seem to perform better when they're confident that they're doing the right thing. And so patient engagement provides these opportunities to really clarify that. And as I'll say later, to do right by patients. So here are a few things to understand from patients so they can share really what are their participation, perceptions, and drivers. What are the health and social impacts of disease so that we can design studies in a more patient-focused way. How does the disease treatment impact their lives? And what are their needs in terms of patients around information? And so clinical researchers have an opportunity to provide leadership here. So patients, when we're talking about disease impact, they really want sponsors to know things like the impact of the treatment administration, the dosage, the mixing, matching, side effects, on and off times, shuffling through treatments to try to address specific symptoms. There's things like timing and frequency, and of course, expenses related to uncovered treatments. In addition to that, really need to understand how, as I said earlier, the disease impacts their life socially, because this is a big part of the motivation, just ability to get through the clinical research process. For example, for some diseases, the illness really impacts all aspects of life, being able to take care of oneself, to maintain relationships, their emotional impacts of living in isolation. There's the frustration of the family, there's fear about being dependent on loved ones, there's loss of friends due to lack of mobility, and many around the patient don't understand the physical or emotional impacts that the disease is happening. These are some examples from the FDA Voice of Patient reports. So I really recommend just reading them. If we're going to increase trial participation, we need to understand why patients do it. So for example, from a C-script study or survey, we found that patients frequently cite things such as to improve the lives of others and to advance medicine. But and these things are alongside, I think, what we would think alongside improving their disease condition. So knowing the drivers for study participation can help reach patients and meet their needs. A final point to make in understanding patients is with respect to their interest in what's going on in the scientific area and contributing to scientific understanding. So here again is an opportunity for researchers to be involved in the education process. So some of the things they would be interested in, the patients that is like the progress of ongoing research, predictive biomarkers knowledge around disease prevention, earlier diagnosis, and disease management, emerging research in things like stem cells and pain classification as well. So what are sponsors really starting to do well to improve patient communication? So establishing clear goals, and then this is internal, really from the internal perspective, objectives and organizational framework for patient engagement, connecting with patient communities early prior to actual designing studies, and implementing, an approach, a strategic plan to really address patient engagement kind of end-to-end through the entire life cycle. And so here's a summary of just some examples of objectives for communicating with patients. So one would be improving clinical study participation, strengthening partnerships with patient, caregiver through education and support, obtaining patient input, as you said, to drive the better design of drug studies, improving the patient experience during the study, supporting patients' healthcare ecosystem by providing specific information, for example, they could share with HCPs, with their doctors, and providing the findings to patients about how the study kind of turned out, and in a way they can understand. And that's why, and there's a lot of obvious emphasis on things like lay language summaries now. Secondly, working to better understand patients' needs. Historically, this has been an activity of, say, patient services, but what about on the clinical research side? What is the strategy for engagement here? So right now, patients are being heard through active engagement with advocacy, or they're going to, companies are going to advisory boards for inputs to the design, outcome measures, tools, and technologies to support the patient interaction over the course of the trial. And then there's also the passive interaction, for example, through social listening, to gain insights and develop journey maps and case studies. And just from a supporting the trial standpoint, there's of course patient apps and concierge types of services, virtual assistants, and travel and reimbursement to really help them get through the kind of logistics of just participation in the trial itself. So despite the flurry of activity, patient engagement is still in a state of experiment, a lot of experimenting, as it's being shaped by several drivers simultaneously. On the sponsor side, there is this increasing ability to understand the patient experience through social listening. There's advances in digital medicine and the ability to collect data through patient connected devices like mobile devices. And then there's a lot of just general insights being gained about the value of having patient satisfaction and customer satisfaction, and the economic kind of translation of loyalty. These are all things that are being understood more clearly. And then on the patient side, there's an increased understanding of the disease science, the ongoing progress, because information is just more findable now. And so patients are more empowered. They're desiring more power, personal empowerment in terms of managing their disease, and that also includes holistic approaches to health. And then there's increased communication within the patient communities, and this is primarily happening because of the explosion of social media and discussion groups. So they're sharing information amongst themselves. So as a result, the industry is still being shaped by patterns of experimentation, kind of reacting to those various drivers. Sponsors are struggling to understand the return on the investment or the value in business terms. But of course, this produces the awareness limitations that we referred to earlier when, kind of looking at things through very specific dimensions. But in short, everyone is working to figure things out through listening and through experience. So with all the activity going on, what's really having the most impact? The information is not super clear, but as many are aware, DIA Tufts completed a poll, and it turned out that approximately 50% of surveyed companies are doing PE initiatives in drug development, and three really stood out just from the dimensions of cost and effort to implement. On the analog side, there were patient advisory and patient advocacy support and involvement, and then on the digital side, the social media and online engagement. So the patient advisory panels and focus groups, they continue to be a prevalent option, using a third party to provide input to help get input for things like the protocol or ICF design and procedures, required patient services, etc. And this is an option where the patient anonymity can be maintained while this important information is learned. Patient advocacy groups continue to be effective, and they can help with recruitment or retention, health authority interacting with the health authorities and just helping patients to understand the benefits of research. So on the digital side, social media and online engagement are really being used to build awareness of clinical research. With well over half the global population using social media, it really has grown in terms of being used for patient recruitment efforts to better target potential research participants. And of course, there are some challenges with that, such as the country-specific compliance, data privacy, and managing adverse events. But if done effectively, this is increasingly being seen as a cost-effective or a potentially really cost-effective option. I believe Novartis has used Twitter to increase awareness of one of its phase 2 trials, and there's a lot of others using text messaging and other methods. A technology that's emerging and increasing because of its potential is telemedicine as well. Some companies are doing innovative trials. For example, I think Sanofi is doing a trial in collaboration with Science 37, a siteless clinical trial focused company, and really I think one of the objectives here is to improve retention just by making participation in the trial easier. Currently, there are about 40,000 clinical studies recruiting patients in the U.S., with some requiring thousands of participants. And according to another C-script study, approximately 80% are delayed due to recruitment problems. So digital trials can really be a solution to participation hurdles and really address these delays, particularly when there are geographic hurdles where just participants live far away from sites, or there's a limited number of sites. Through models like this. And so with this kind of telemedicine model, you may have a mixture again of the sort of digital and non-digital stuff. So patients are monitored or interact with researchers via a mobile device, and then there's a boots on the ground technicians or nurses providing services like blood draws, and then patient data being sent to researchers digitally instead of the patients actually having to visit sites. According to the Center for Remote Medical Management, acronym CRIM, the role of telehealth and outpatient platforms is becoming more prevalent in patient care. Studies have shown that telemedicine models result in cost savings, patient satisfaction, and provider satisfaction, as well as positive clinical outcomes. So this group has introduced an innovative a solution for monitoring chest pain remotely using their cellular outpatient 12-lead telemetry with emergency response. This is really, I think, the first or one of the first management packages developed, and it's, or at least by the center, and it's designed specifically for the management of intermediate and low-risk chest pain patients at home. So it's got a heart monitor, interfaces with wireless networks, and then real-time diagnostic data with geolocation is sent out from the patient. And so technology like this really represents an opportunity for remote management of patients and management of the protocol, capturing and retaining the clinical data, and really the overall management of the trial. So according to Patient Power, which is a patient advocacy group working in oncology, patients must have a central role in their care because when they're involved, they get better treatment and chance to access clinical trials and innovative drugs. So for many advocacy organizations like this, the goal is to empower patients to get the best patient care by equipping them with information so that they can address barriers such as treatment costs. Currently, organizations like Patient Power are creating communities of patients. They're sharing patient stories. They're monitoring and lobbying for research funding and empowering patients to become advocates for patient-centric treatment, contributing to scientific conferences and advancing the patient voice in that space. Another organization, PCORI, is also doing critical work to increase research information to support the healthcare decisions and promoting patient-centered outcomes in research and just promoting patient-centered research generally. So with all the possibilities for patient engagement in digital and non-digital, how do we build effective engagement into clinical research planning? So it's simple, right? The approach to improvement involves establishing goals, really keeping in mind that we want to do right by patients, developing the organization and process to empower people, and then the execution and measurement. Must be built into that, and leading to opportunities for improving and getting better in this space. So what do we mean by doing right by patients? Well, a lot of money can be spent building technology for trial participants, but it's not clear that patients are entirely on board with moving away from the personal relationship between providers and patients. So companies looking to improve patient engagement should really consider how to achieve their goals based on specific needs, not copying trends or what others in the industry are doing. And obviously this is a really disease kind of specific or patient community specific. It's not one size fits all. There are methods for really getting at these questions that are kind of lower scale but big impact, such as protocol simulation or patient experience work, understanding the value of different communication approaches with the patients, and this can be done through an iterative process. A small investment can lead to insights, and then you course correct and refine the approach, and ultimately leading to the bigger breakthroughs in understanding, or stopping an ill-advised investment before it's made. Just wanted to illustrate the advantages of a iterative approach or sort of small scale, at least initially, with course correction built in. I like this marshmallow challenge. I think it was created by Peter Skillman, a designer and a user experience person with a background in mobile operating systems. But with this challenge, there were teams of 4. They're given 18 minutes, and the task is to build the tallest freestanding structure using the materials in this top left image, the spaghetti tape string and a marshmallow. And so what happened was at least surprising to me, maybe surprising to others, is that of the different groups that performed well, I think obviously the architects and engineers, that would maybe be expected, but the group that did second best was kindergartners, and that was really surprising. But you look at the approach in this bottom right slide, the winning formula, we can contrast the business students with kindergarten students, and we can see that their success was really rooted in how they went about building the structure. So where the business students waited to the very end to build with lots of planning, the building piece represented by that marshmallow at the end, the kindergarten students built along the way and then made refinements. So each one of the marshmallows on the kindergarten student row represents, an attempt at actual building. So I think this image really illustrates, why kind of starting to do work is important, and maybe de-emphasizes the importance of planning somewhat, even though we know that planning is critical. Also, actually building and doing is critical too. So second, what do we mean by organizational empowerment? So by that, I really mean involving people who care about, specifically about this subject. It helps if the people leading patient engagement efforts are genuinely passionate for it. So ensuring that people leading or driving patient communication have a desire to communicate with patients, to understand their experiences and needs, and apply this understanding in the clinical study patient interaction. Second thing is really considering what you know. The availability of information on patient experience is astounding, but it's not always necessary to spend lots of money to get meaningful insights rather. A lot can be understood by drawing from personal experience. There are individuals everywhere in our lives who've been directly impacted by illness, either as patients or as caregivers. And then another thing from an organizational standpoint is communicating goals clearly. Clarity and focus go a long way to achieving results, particularly here because it's not really understood by all the stakeholders. So develop a vision, drive towards sort of organizational thinking, establish goals that really address specific study challenges that are measurable, attainable, time-bound, etc. Starting with where there is a need, such as studies with particular problematic adherence, or where the visits are challenging to patients, such as with debilitating disease, because a lot, obviously we're all working on our day jobs, and so this has to translate to something that is meaningful in terms of what the work that's going on every day to people. And then monitor and evaluate the efforts. So identify where the synergies are in patient engagement initiatives of the various functions that are working on this stuff, and maybe not sharing information, and then really how, from a organization standpoint, everyone can benefit from the information sharing in a kind of synergized approach to patient engagement. And then, of course, preparing to discontinue things that aren't working. So finally, just talking about the execution process, which isn't new, but I think it just is so appropriate, even in the context of patient engagement, which seems to be such a buzzword and seem like such a novel concept, or at least it seems to be presented that way, but it's really not, and implementing it is not novel either. The approach to patient engagement should really be based on factors that are organization and patient community specific. So start moving the needle by assessing the current opportunities, the identification of pain points and areas for improvement, and then focus on areas for investment, research time and money, maybe starting with quick wins, where's the biggest bang for the buck, and then including a long-term vision for strategic opportunities. And what are the opportunities for just organizational learning or maturity in this space. And then developing a patient engagement approach that has the underlying processes and technologies built in. This is where so many functions really need to be partners or stakeholders in doing this. The services, the needed organizational change, as we pointed out, and the need for coordination of internal functions and change management, and then moving to execution and implementation and measurement to get on that measurement piece, of course, to get a clear understanding of what the benefits are. So that really concludes rather the presentation, and Billy, I don't know if we have some time, and we can take some questions.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Amiri. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We had some questions come in, and we'll just start going through them. The first one is, what functions need to be involved in the communicating with patients through advocacy?
Well, yeah, I mean, most companies already have patient advocacy function or patient services, and they're probably interacting with a lot of these organizations. But I think really the kind of the area that maybe is not as developed is where, the clinical program is really developing these relationships, because the advocacy groups are obviously interested not just in, I guess, marketed medicines, but really in the research and the science as a whole for the benefit of patients suffering from disease. So really, there needs to be a mechanism, and each organization is different, but where really the clinical team or clinical piece of the organization can interact with advocacy.
All right, great. Next up, the next question is, what are the compliance requirements around working with advocacy versus patients?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the short answer is it's a lot easier. Patient advocacy groups were established, I think, for the purpose of um, acting kind of as a in between researchers and patients. Primarily, obviously, to ensure that the patient's best interests are kept in mind during clinical trials, and also, being able to help or contribute to some of the more complicated legal or ethical discussions around the study of investigational treatment. So I think they're kind of positioned in that space really where they can create that separation, but really support the patient's needs and advocate for the patients and make it sort of an easier interface for sponsors.
Great. Next up, we have what kind of information is there about patient satisfaction with telemedicine vis-a-vis face-to-face interaction with clinical staff?
Well, there are a few different satisfaction surveys that I've seen, and I think it's really promising and favorable. I know, just having talked with healthcare providers, for those that are using it, they really do find it useful and a powerful way to interact with patients. I think there was the American Academy of Sleep Medicine launched a telemedicine platform, and then for, I guess, a sleep healthcare study, and there was kind of like a web-based video platform for interacting and having like patient consultations, and they did a survey at the end of that study, and really, there seemed to be agreement in the results that the quality and the content of the telemedicine visits was really comparable to in-person, and some of the advantages that they brought up were really the decreased travel burden and the convenience. So I know that one's out there, and I've seen some others. So, it really does depend on the specific disease community, but I think as a whole, there's no question that overall, this healthcare is moving in a direction where telemedicine will be a player, and patients are responding, to it, I think, with a favorable response.
All right, great. And it looks like this is the final question we have received. If we don't receive any more questions, we will be ending after this one. So if you have any questions, please type them in. Finally, what are the most valuable things we can do organizationally to transition to virtual or telemedicine or a telemedicine clinical model?
Oh yeah, so so just really learning the space, how to, I guess, capture, how to facilitate a virtual visit, understanding more about patient satisfaction with respect, to specific disease areas and demographics. I cited the one example, and I've seen others, but it's really important to kind of drill down into that, and more specifically with respect to patient communities. There's some pretty good surveys out there, and clinical visits, as I said, are being performed today by HCPs, and I think once that's done, starting to really pilot, as we said before, and gain experience on a sort of controlled scale.
All right, great. Well, that appears to be all the questions we received. Amiri, thank you for the presentation, and everyone who signed up and signed on. I want to thank you all for joining today. We're going to be posting this webinar on the Pharmica website, and I will send out an email notifying all of you when it's up. So if you enjoyed the content and know anyone else who might benefit from seeing it, please share it. Please check back with Pharmica.com for future webinars that we'll be holding. And, again, thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.